Hey everybody, this is Jason Ostrowski and welcome to another edition of the Everything Real Estate Podcast. I hope all of you are busy selling houses today. You're driving around in your car. You may be listening to this episode, and hopefully, if you have buyers out there, there are not 10 offers on the property already that you're showing today. So with that said, today's episode, we're going to have a fantastic guest to talk about the market, specifically the local economy in our region as it relates to real estate. His name is Kevin Gillen, and nobody knows the local economy better than Kevin. He got his P.H.D. from Wharton. He holds positions as a senior research fellow with the Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation. He is an adjunct professor of finance at Drexel University. He has a background in urban economics, real estate finance, and public policy. And lastly, his research on urban economic issues appear in numerous publications. Wow. I would certainly say that Kevin is qualified to talk about the real estate market. In fact, I feel like I need to go back to school for 20 years just to match Kevin at this point. So let's get right into our conversation with him. Great information on this episode, and we'll pick it up on the other side. I love to have a local guy on here who really knows the local market. Instead of being so national, we're going to get right into the micro statistics of the Philadelphia region and our marketplace. So starting off, Kevin, how you doing today? I'm sure you're feeling a little bit better than when we last spoke.
Yes, much better, Jason. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm good. So hot off the presses, you have some new statistics we're going to start right off with in the Bright footprint. Now, our footprint is a little bit more expanded than the Bright network, but you can actually get a good sense of what's happening out there from what you're seeing. So now that you have had a chance to look over these brand new Bright stats, hot off the presses, haven't been released yet, is there anything out there that is a surprise for you with these statistics, or is this more of what you expected?
Generally speaking, for the region as a whole, the numbers are pretty much what I expected overall. The market is still very strong, but we're seeing deceleration in many of the major market indicators. The one thing that was a bit surprising was that the pricing year-on-year price increase in the city was much smaller than the suburbs. It was around 4%, which is in line with its historic average. That's not low, that's average. But it's much lower than it has been recently, and it was much lower than the suburbs. However, they may just be, it's February, it's not the most active month, so that just may be a statistical blip.
With your background and being that we're in the market that we're in, and like I had said earlier, it's almost like a unicorn market. So, this is probably the most intense sellers market that I can ever remember. I've been in for 15 years in the business. Are you amazed at what you see, or does this all strictly make sense to you from a numbers perspective?
Oh no, it's pretty amazing. Especially as the number one issue to most realtors, at least when I address realtor groups, is the incredibly low levels of inventories. When I'm interviewed by the press, they seem more concerned about what interest rates are going to do and how they could affect the market. But the realtors I talk to say that that's a concern, but it's very much a secondary concern compared to just the fact that there's just no supply out there. I mean, we're looking at, days on market now are like, 10 average days on market are like 10, 11 days. Month supply of inventory it's no longer month supply of inventory, it's days supply of inventory. I mean, homes are selling in 10, 11 days, things like that. What surprises me, to get to your question, is the one thing that I and almost every other economist keeps getting wrong is that we think inventories are going to bottom out, and they just don't. They just always find a new low. It's like that, the Limbo song, how low can you go? No matter how low they get, they seem to, be able to find a way to go lower.
Yeah, I tell you, I've never seen realtors, at least that I know, be more miserable than what we are right now. We're all a little bit ornery because, to start off the year, I have so many buyers. And in fact, I got a couple more buyer leads this week, and I don't know where I'm going to put them. And it's so troubling for us as realtors. And on the flip side, I put a couple new listings on this week, and it was almost like I can't describe the level of just the feeding frenzy that is going on with these listings as we speak. The first day of showings are actually today on 2 listings that I have. And I already have people fighting over these listings. I'm getting offers sight unseen. I told another agent yesterday who has a listing coming on that looks nice that she's going to have fist fights in the front yard, over this listing. And it's getting to be such a challenge in that way. So, with that lack of inventory, the sales have been down significantly, at least to start the year over year, comparatively speaking. Do you attribute that strictly to a lack of inventory, or do you see other factors involved? You had mentioned the interest rates, but is it strictly just a lack of inventory at this point?
I think increasing unaffordability is becoming an issue. I think lack of inventory is what's dominating in the short run, but I think increased unaffordability and rising rates are going to be more of a factor in the intermediate run. Particularly I would say in the latter half of this year. But you're correct; it's a very frustrating market. I mean, the last time things were tough was the Great Recession, and it wasn't pleasant for anyone because the market was just basically dead. But what's really incredibly frustrating right now is that the market is hot and you've got the demand, you just don't have the product. It's, what do you do? It's like you could be making money hand over fist if people would just list their damn homes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what one of my questions is, locally on the horizon, do you see anything to open up that bottleneck on listing inventory? I mean, it's crazy. And I don't mean to spill my guts to you, but can you give us some hope out there? Because I dream of waking up to hot sheets full of new listings coming on the market. And I wonder if my dreams will ever be reality again at this point. Can you see anything around the horizon that will open things up a little bit?
Well, the thing is, it's not just a matter of economics. It's a matter of consumer psychology. And I'm an economist, not a psychiatrist or psychologist. So I have trouble getting into, potential sellers' heads. What I can tell you is that it's very difficult because it's a vicious circle. People won't list their homes until other people list their homes, right? I mean, yeah, it's a great time to sell, but then you've got to be a move-up buyer. Well, where are you going to move up and buy to if no one else is listing their home? So you're just going to sit on your home and wait, right? So either, we just need to let the cycle run its course, which, I don't know how long it could take. I got to believe we're near the peak of the current one. Otherwise, we need what in economics we call an exogenous shock, meaning something from outside just the housing economy. So we would need a recession or something like that, or which would cause people to get behind on their mortgages, then be forced to list, or they get foreclosed upon and they have to list, something like that. So it's a very tough call. However, I have to believe we're closer to the end of this than we are from the beginning. I mean, this expansionary cycle has been going on now for basically 10 years. The average housing cycle is about 8 to 9 years. So, we're well past the past due date, if you will.
Yeah, I feel like we're in brave new territory every day when I wake up. And remembering the Great Recession and how that all went, I would much rather, and I had said this on a previous podcast, I would rather be in this market than that market because that was just completely dead in the water. There was nothing happening out there. We'd hear crickets chirping for a couple of years straight. I'd rather be in this market, but you talk about those specific events that may change things. So one of my questions is, how do you think the continued sanctions against, Russia or even an escalation in the Russian-Ukraine conflict could affect the U.S. housing market? Are there things that could affect us here in Philadelphia and the region as a whole?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Believe it or not, no one wants to see an escalation of what's going on over there. But believe it or not, there are some potential silver linings to that for the housing market anyway. First of all, high gas prices. They're going to be around for a while, and they're probably going to go even higher. Now, that can affect the value of outlying homes and outlying communities because they have longer commutes. But, we're in an era now of work from home, right? So it's not going to affect them as much as it would, 10 years ago or so. So what I would expect the high gas prices to affect the market is that they will not affect the value of relatively higher value homes that are occupied by professionals who can work from home from their computer screen. They'll disproportionately affect the value of homes in suburban working class communities because those are people who cannot work from home. So that would be one adverse effect of the current unrest and the high gas prices. The second one is kind of mixed. So first of all, when there is just uncertainty in the world, people become what we economists call risk averse, meaning they become less willing to take risks. And by that, I mean, they're less willing to make big investments and big purchases. And of course, that includes homes because homes are both. They're a big investment and a big purchase, right? So they want to hold off until things get more settled rather than, commit, all their money to something at a time of, great unrest. But on the other hand, During times of unrest, there's what we economists call a flight to quality. So that, that's gold. The stock market is going to drop. Bonds aren't doing anything with interest rates being so low. That leaves real estate. So we actually could see an influx of capital into housing, and particularly from foreign countries, seeking a safe harbor for their money, if you will. And that can have a beneficial effect on not only our national housing market, but our local one as well. So it's a mixed bag. Which of those effects will dominate is something we'll have to wait to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And obviously, like you said, nobody wants this conflict to, become more than it already is. It's already a tragedy that's going on over there. But obviously, when things happen on the other side of the world, there's a ripple effect for, world economies and all that stuff. So, it is interesting that we may see foreign money coming into the real estate market. And so with that,
by the way, we get very little of that in Philly in general. It's, New York, Miami, LA, San Francisco, the glamour cities are the ones that really get that. So I would not expect a lot of foreign money coming here. But, people, might be national investors, though, might want to, buy up homes. So the big trend right now is build to rent or buy to rent. The rental market's been doing extremely well. And that's one of the reasons inventories are so low, is because sellers, rather than selling their home, are actually renting it out and keeping it, off the market because the rental market's been doing so well.
And that's one of the things that you had said in your presentation before that really caught my eye, because I didn't think of it that way. I didn't think of how strong the rental market is, and therefore investors and landlords are keeping their homes longer, and it's just adding to the mix of the lack of inventory out there. I feel like this is a perfect storm when it comes to, reasons why people aren't selling. And one of those, things that maybe loosen that bottleneck, like we talked about, is new construction. And you talked about new construction and as particularly in the city being kind of punitive to build certain types of housing in the city, and even in the suburbs. That's always an issue as well. Can you talk about new construction starts and kind of historically where we stand in terms of new construction, say within the past 10, 20 years, where that stands and what's going to happen with that in the future?
Sure. So again, one of the reasons supply is so low is because the flow of new construction has been so low. It took a massive hit during the Great Recession 10 years ago. I mean, I actually have a chart, I didn't show it during my presentation, but housing starts absolutely just plummeted. And only very recently have they recovered to their average historic levels. So basically, as the flow of new housing has dropped, that's what's added, or I should say subtracted from the supply of housing that's out there. So that's another reason why supply has been so low, is because new construction has been so low. And we've only very recently, and I mean within the past year, recovered from that. Within the city, the 10-year tax abatement has been a critical factor in housing investment and new construction. I assume your listeners are familiar with that program, right? So that's been around for roughly 22 years. It was passed in 2000. Prior to the 10-year tax abatement, Philadelphia was adding about maybe 500 new homes per year to its housing stock. And that's in a city of 1.5 million people. I mean, that's nothing. It's less than 1%, right? As soon as the abatement was passed, that jumped into the thousands. In 2021, last year, 10,000 new housing units were approved by the Department of Licenses and Inspections, which is an all-time high. I mean, we haven't seen that level of new construction since probably the immediate post-war era, 80 years ago or so. So that tells you one of the biggest reasons for that was because City Council has enacted legislation that effectively cuts the value of the abatement in half. Okay, so we still have the abatement, but it's not as valuable or impactful as it used to be. So all the home builders and developers in the city were rushing to the gates before midnight on New Year's Eve to get their permit approved so they could get the full abatement before the new year rolled over and the changes took effect. So, of those 10,000 units that were approved, I don't know how many of them will actually be built and completed. But obviously, the abatement has genuine market value. Otherwise, they would not be, would not be rushing to the gates to, file for that permit if it really didn't make a meaningful impact on the bottom line of their new projects. In the city, the biggest constraints to new construction are the lack of available land, particularly large plots of land. No one makes money building, single family, one-off row houses anymore. You need to build an apartment building or an entire block of single family homes. So finding available land that is priced at a a number that makes your project work and that you can assemble is a big obstacle. The other one is a political obstacle as opposed to an economic one. Philadelphia has not seen such new construction, like I said, in 70, 80 years since the post-war era. And it's something that, frankly, many of the older neighborhoods, the residents of the older neighborhoods are not familiar with, and therefore they find change uncomfortable and dislocating, and not without reason. I mean, they're seeing their tax assessments go up. They're seeing the flavor of their neighborhood change. They feel like it's not, not their neighborhood anymore. Many of them, if they're renting, are being priced out. Their rents are going up. They can't afford it. They've got to move someplace else, and they don't like it. And like I said, and not without reasons. But the outcome of that is that there has been a lot of growing anti-developer sentiment in the city, which is one of the biggest reasons City Council, cut the value of the abatement in half. It's just seen as this unnecessary tax windfall to developers who come in and gentrify neighborhoods and make an unnecessary and unaccountable fortune at the expense of the long-term, relatively lower-income residents who live there. So between the economic issue of land assemblage or lack of land supply, and the political issue of just general anti-developer sentiment, people who show up at your ZBA meeting to voice their opposition to your project. Those, I would say, are the two biggest issues that developers are facing in the city right now, and the biggest obstacles to new housing construction.
And what do you see happening out there, say, just in the suburban region? Do you see the same, obviously not the same factors at play in the city? Is new construction ever going to catch up to demand? Is it ever going to be a case where that is going to get satisfied within the next couple of years? Let's put it that way.
Highly unlikely. The issue in the suburbs is very different than the city. The suburbs have plenty of land. There's plenty of land out there. The issue, however, is NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. Most suburban residents just don't want new development. Period. Especially low density, sprawling single family detached development. They view that as it causes additional traffic congestion. They like their green space. Everyone does, and that's justifiable. They don't want new residents putting their kids in the schools and overloading, the schools, especially if it's moderate to lower income residents. So they're just opposed to new development in general. The development that does happen tends to be in already developed areas. So it tends to, areas that are being redeveloped from lower density to higher density. Taking down single family homes and putting in apartments, especially near SEPTA stations that are transit oriented development. Those have a better chance of succeeding because they're not seen as putting as big a footprint on the environment, as 100 new single-family detached homes that are being built by Toll Brothers, right?
Yeah, we see that all the time, and especially in the suburbs, the impervious space and all that stuff. I think there's all these concerns about environmental factors as well as people liking their open space. So with that said, obviously, the demand for the suburbs with COVID became even more kind of rampant, where people were tending to move away from the cities or densely populated area for more open space. Do you still see that being the case, or how do you see people moving about the region in terms of home sales right now?
During COVID, peak COVID in 2020, there was a significant outflux of people from the city seeking lower density, more green, healthier environments, having a private yard, private space. The city lost about 5 to 6% of its households in 2020 to 2021. That has leveled off. Interestingly enough, most of the households that left Philadelphia, Philadelphia's city, the proper, did not go to the suburbs. They left the region altogether. They went to their home in the Poconos. They went to their home at the shore. If they were older, they maybe had a condo in Florida or Arizona, so they went there. The suburbs, even though the city lost about 5% of its population, the suburbs only gained about 1%. So most of the households that vacated the city did not go to suburban homes or buy a farmhouse in Bucks County or Chester County. They left the region altogether. But like I said, that has 99% leveled off. We've stabilized to a new equilibrium. The segment of the market that was hardest hit by COVID was actually center city condos. It's high density living. You're sharing common space and elevators with lots of other people. You're breathing the same air as everyone else, just sharing the same HVAC systems. Moreover, when everything was shut down during COVID, or at least there were capacity restraints, that removes the entire reason of living in Center City. If you can't go to the theater, if you can't go to restaurants, if you can't go to shops, you can't go to museums, why are you paying a premium to live downtown? On top of that, there was some major inconveniences too, because for most of COVID, a lot of buildings restricted elevator use to one household only. So only you or members of your family or people you live with could use the elevator at the same time. So, if you live on the 35th floor and you have to go out for a carton of milk, every time the elevator door opens, if someone else is on it, you have to wait until it's empty. So that could make, a trip to get a carton of milk an hour. I mean, just waiting for the elevator, going there and back. So that was also a major inconvenience.
Yeah, I mean, let's not go back to those days anytime soon. That's just crazy to even think about. So, I want to circle back about appreciation, and you talk about people potentially their buying power or being priced out of the market for certain homes. So last year we just saw a crazy amount of appreciation within the region in terms of home prices. How do you think this year is going to go in terms of appreciation and maybe into 2023? Do you still see, a breakneck pace of appreciation, or do you see that slowing down a little bit as we, like you had said, we come to the near peak of this cycle, or maybe we're just past it?
It's still going strong, but it's been decelerating. I'm not predicting it's decelerating. It already is. So we hit probably peak probably last summer. And price appreciation has been slowing since. Now it's still, let me emphasize, it's still running above average. I mean, it's still a strong market. I'm just saying it's decelerating a bit. Okay. So we saw year-on-year price increases last summer of, 15, 17%, which is enormous. Historically, Philly has grown about 4 to 5% per year. So, that's triple, what our historic rate is. Now we're down to about 8 to 9%. So prices are still growing at double their historic rate, but they're down from, the triple rate that they were growing, 8 months ago or so. Now, we're just on the verge of the spring market here. And of course, things always pick up during that. So I expect it to be a strong market, again, in terms of price appreciation. But we are seeing declining sales. Sales volume is still, again, like prices running above average, but is also decelerating, okay? And I think one of the biggest reasons is that unaffordability is becoming a bigger issue. You cannot, growing house prices is a great thing. You guys work on commission. The bigger the number, the better for you, right? But if house price growth outpaces income growth, that's bad, because it doesn't matter what prices are if no one can afford to buy the homes, right? You need homes to actually transact to, grab that 3%. So we're seeing a lot of homes, start to move beyond the realm of affordability to many middle income buyers. I also think there's a significant amount of buyer fatigue out there that, they've gotten into these bidding wars. As soon as a home is listed, it gets picked up by cash by someone. They're becoming a little more reluctant, I think. They want to wait till things are just a little more calmer and maybe prices, are a little more reasonable before they're willing to buy. And on top of that, we've got rising interest rates, which are also going to put a bit of a headwind on house prices. So my overall prediction is that it's going to be a very strong spring, but the sales volume is not going to be what it would be in a normal market. So you'll have your high prices, but you just won't have the churn that you would normally expect. And then in the second half of the year, increased interest rates continue to grow. Things in the Ukraine and Russia remain unsettled, and especially because unaffordability is going to become a bigger and bigger issue, is going to put a bite on the market. So I would expect a cooler fall and next winter than I would expect otherwise.
I can only speak for where I am in Montgomery County in the suburbs, but we're already kind of seeing that, and you can sense that buyer fatigue, like you had said, but it always amazes me. I just don't know where all this money comes from. You being an economist, maybe you know that better than I do, but some of the offers that you get on these properties are just, kind of outrageous, and it just amazes me that somehow we just keep climbing and climbing. Whenever you think that there's going to be kind of a peak and a fall off, somehow we surpass that, at least in terms of pricing. And some of these neighborhoods, quite frankly, have just gotten kind of out of hand in terms of pricing. But like you had said, we make a living off of sales. So obviously, as long as the people are willing to pay, it's good for us to a point. But I do think representing these buyers out there, it's becoming incredibly challenging for everybody. So with that said, I know you had talked about the year ahead here. Taking out your crystal ball and projecting into the future here, how much longer would you say just in total? Now, it's hard to say when we have a true market shift. It's going to be probably over time. But when do you see things kind of steering away from a seller's market into a more traditionally balanced, maybe 5-6 months supply of inventory out there kind of market, just a traditional market that we see? How long do you think that's going to take?
I know this cycle, this expansionary cycle, the current one, has been going on for roughly 10 years. Like I said, the average duration of a housing upcycle is about 8 to 9. So we've already passed that goalpost, right? As I like to say, predicting where housing markets are going is actually pretty easy. It's predicting the things that predict housing that's really hard. So if you give me a good forecast of interest rates and household formation and income growth and job growth and new housing construction, I can guarantee you I can give you a very good prediction of what house prices will be and what sales volume will be over the next year to two. But I don't know how to predict interest rates and household formation and what construction costs are going to be and what land costs are going to be, right? So that's the challenging part. But I would say that I don't see the market turning anytime really soon. I mean, I think you're going to have, like I said, a very strong spring and a very solid summer. Absent global unrest and things like that, or God forbid a new variant in COVID or something like that. Obviously, I can't predict things like that. But I would say that 2022 will be a good year. It won't be as good as 2021 was. And I think 2023 will also be even slower. But I would predict we're probably at least a year out from when we hit our peak, and then we'll start to see a cooling in the market. And then, by the way, that's not a bad thing. I mean, I'd like to see house prices be more rational. I mean, if they come down a bit, but sales volume rises because now homes are more affordable, that's a good thing. That's a good thing, not just for your industry, but for society as well, right? I'm actually more concerned that we don't have a cooling in the market than if we do. And we all remember the housing bubble. It sucked. It wasn't fun, but we all got through it, right? The thing is, down markets are temporary. They last 2 to 3 years, and then you get 7, 8, 9 years of an upcycle again. My main concern is if house prices don't correct and become rational, because then what will happen is we'll move to a new higher plateau of just general housing unaffordability. And that's a long-term problem, not a short-term problem, right? Downturns are a short-term problem. They suck, but you get through it. But what if we just become a permanently less affordable country? I mean, basically, we become like Europe. So only rich people own homes. Everyone rents the rest of their life. That's terrible for not only the housing industry, but for society as a whole, because there's lots of studies showing that homeowners are just more civically engaged people, right? I mean, they vote, they attend local school board meetings, they maintain their homes, they mow their lawns more regularly, they're more engaged in the community, they pay attention to local issues. Renters are just more transient people, they're just not as engaged. So we're just going to have a population that's just less civically engaged if we become a nation of renters as opposed to homeowners. And then that to me is far worse than having 2 to 3 years of a downturn again.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I mean, what you just said, I think, is my main concern right now. What I see is just the affordability issue where I am. And it just is so hard, especially, let's just say you have a buyer out there. And I think the listeners all relate to this, is that you have a buyer out there who, maybe they're on the younger side. They're putting 5% down on a potential property, right? That's the only thing that they can do. They don't have 20% to put down on a mortgage payment. And you go out into the marketplace. Well, right now, pretty much every single property, you're being priced out of being able to afford a home, because some seller is always going to pick either a higher price or they want some kind of appraisal protection, where 5% buyers, usually do not have enough money to provide any kind of protection towards an appraisal. And we're often seeing cash in the marketplace too, like we talked about. I don't know where all this money comes from, but we see cash buyers on these, houses that are $200,000, $300,000, and all of a sudden they can't afford anything. They get frustrated. They just decide to rent for another couple of years, and that drives, right to your point about being civically engaged, becoming part of the community, becoming part of that homeowner class. that takes pride in their community. And that does really, really concern me right now as we stand here today. So I agree with you. A downturn in the market is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not that we're going to go through the Great Recession again. It's just a downturn, and it's normal in the cyclical way of things.
Yeah. I get asked all the time, are we in another bubble? And my answer is emphatically no. Okay. What's different this time around is basically credit conditions. I mean, credit was just so loose and easy, during the housing bubble that, the joke was, as long as you could fog up a mirror with your breath, you could get a mortgage, right? When was the last time you heard the phrase subprime lending? You haven't heard that term probably in 10 years, right? So money is not sloshing around like it used to. So I actually have I think I showed a chart during my presentation showing what the average credit, the percent of buyers now with credit scores of either good or above average. And it's the majority of buyers right now. During the housing bubble, plenty of people with, low to zero credit scores were getting approved. Not the case this time. Buyers today are much more credit-worthy. They're paying, with higher down payments. There's no more interest-only mortgages really anymore. Moreover, when I crunch my numbers for my housing report, one of the things I always look at are spec sales, speculative sales. You remember there was all sorts of flipping during the housing bubble. Remember those days? Mm-hmm. I screen for those sales, and they're next to nothing anymore. I mean, you don't see homes, transacting, twice in a year or twice in a quarter or anything like that. So the buyers that are buying are, serious buyers that are occupying these places. They're not investors. They're not flippers. So, no, we're not in a bubble. Now, again, that doesn't mean we can't have a correction. If things get overvalued, they get overvalued. But what I see is rather than house prices, crashing, which I don't think they will, they'll just sort of level off for a few years, and that's a good thing because then it lets incomes, catch up to them and make things more rational and then put you back in a more balanced situation.
To your point, I mean, I remember my very first clients used to tell me this story. I tell this story to my mentees and kind of newer agents in the business where they got a no doc loan. She did not have a job. They handed her basically like $300,000 and said, here you go, here's your loan. To me, that's just crazy to think about that happening now because there is such scrutiny with buyers and lending nowadays. I always say outside of like a full body cavity search, they're going to ask you for everything under the sun in terms of your qualifying for the mortgage. So yeah, I can't see that bubble bursting. The last thing before we get out of here, and you would mention this earlier, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this question. Interest rates. Obviously, everybody has that on their mind right now. I asked a lender yesterday, do you see interest rates going above 5%? Oh my God, 5% before the end of the year. What's your take on everything? Where do you think that's going to lead us as we get further into the year? Where do you see rates going by the end of the year?
If you had asked me 6 months ago or even 3 months ago about rates, I would not have been as concerned about them as I am now. I still think inventories are going to be the dominant factor for the next 6 months or so. But with inflation being what it is, the Fed is going to have to raise rates more aggressively and by a bigger percent than they would otherwise. We all knew that they were going to go up, but 6 months ago, I would have said the rates were starting from such a low level that we got plenty of wiggle room on the upside before they really start to bite on the market. But because I expect them to be going up by more than they would otherwise due to the inflation in the economy, they have become more of a concern to me. So I don't think they're going to matter as much, say, for the spring market. But by the summer and definitely the fall market, I think you'll start to see them have an effect, and by that I mean a cooling effect on the market.
From what you're saying, basically the second half of the year in particular, I think we may see more of these. Once we get past that traditional spring market, that we may see more of that cooling off taking place. So anyway, Kevin, I could talk to you all day about the market. I could talk to you all day about real estate. I really appreciate you taking some time out to talk to us today and kind of, giving us some up-to-date information on the market and where we head from here. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Jason. And the final word, please take advantage of the spring market you're going to have because it could be a while before you see one like it again.
There you go. All right, man. Well, I'm going to do that as soon as we get off this Zoom call. I'm going to try and sell some clients some houses. So thanks a lot for your time. And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
That was this week's interview with Kevin Gillen. We thank him for his time. Great information on that podcast. Here's a few takeaways that I had from my talk with Kevin. Number one, just like anything else in life, nothing lasts forever. So this market that we're in right now, believe it or not, is only going to be temporary. In fact, we may see at the end of the summer heading into the fall, things kind of cooling off a little bit more than they are because affordability may be an issue, according to Kevin, and the interest rates are going to continue to rise. So be on the lookout. Try and make hay this spring is what I would suggest, and get out there, sell some houses while we can, and look for those dynamics to start shifting the market towards the second half of this year. Number two, having said that, even though there are signs of deceleration, appreciation is slowing in the housing market, this is going to be a fantastic year, and next year will be strong as well. We're just saying in historical perspective, comparatively speaking to last year, it's not going to be quite as crazy as it has been. Which leads me to my last point, is that a downturn in the market is not a bad thing, according to Kevin. It's how things should progress in the cyclical manner that we deal with in real estate. It allows incomes to catch up with home values and appreciation, and therefore will help sales into the future. Kevin's main concern is that we don't have that downturn and what that means for the market. So having a downturn for a couple of years, Kevin predicts that's all it would last, would help into the future of our business. And so having a downturn is not a bad thing. Well, that's it for this week's episode. We'll be back in another few weeks with a new topic, a new guest. And if we haven't covered something yet that you want to hear about, reach out to me, jason.ostrowski@foxroach.com. We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't liked and subscribed to our podcast yet, please do so. Leave us a review. It helps us to reach more people. I'll be heading out shortly to the company convention this year in Louisville, so if you plan on attending, hopefully I'll see you out there and we'll get a chance to talk a little bit. In the meantime, I thank you all for listening. This is Jason Ostrowski saying stay safe out there, stay selling, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast.